Well, the parents of Nolan Wells continue to push for answers. Nolan went missing during a 4th of July outing with friends and was later found dead.
Wells' family says the circumstances don't make sense. ABC's Perry Russum has the latest.
The family of Nolan Wells is calling for a thorough and transparent investigation by Mississippi authorities into the death of their 18-year-old son.
We're in a ferocious pursuit for the truth.
On July 4th, Wells traveled by boat with several friends to Horn Island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast to celebrate the holiday. Mississippi investigators say he was last seen on the island at about 3 p.m. and say they are combing through videos taken on the island around that time. According to the sheriff, his mother reported him missing that evening.
This is not how I wanted the world to meet my son. He was just a special kid. Like, he was a special kid, but again, just heart was so big. And we're gonna miss him dearly.
The sheriff is now looking into claims made by the mother of one of the friends that Wells decided to stay behind when a mechanical issue caused their boat to take on water.
It's so hard for me to believe that he would choose to stay on the island. It just wasn't in his character.
Authorities have said they believe Wells drowned, but the Jackson County Sheriff stressed the investigation is still ongoing.
We're working towards the same goal as the family, okay? We want a thorough investigation, and that's what we're going to continue to do until we arrive at the answers that the family deserves.
Wells' family alleges they've recovered his cell phone with deleted messages. His mother says her son was always taking pictures and videos at events. Attorneys for the family say after their experts are done examining Wells' phone, they will hand it over to Mississippi investigators.
I have yet to see a fact or a piece of evidence that suggests any foul play. But if there is, I feel confident that the sheriff's office, the district attorney's office, the members at the Department of Public Safety that deal with these crimes, if there had been one, they will find it and they will do what is necessary.
We are hearing from the mother of one of the boys who was with Nolan Wells before he disappeared. Wells was last seen on July 4th after taking a boat trip to Horn Island and was found dead off the coast of Mississippi Monday morning. Multiple agencies helped to end the search, including the Coast Guard, National Park Service, and the United Cajun Navy.
Those two guys went out to Horn Island. They went on the island. They canvassed around. They went and ran a grid with the boat, put the drone up, looking for any signs of Nolan. Did not find anything. By late afternoon, some weather was moving in offshore. So out of abundance of caution, they came back in, and that's when we decided that we were going to put a plane up the next morning on 6th July. We wanted to find this boy. I wanted him to bring him back to his mother alive and well. I knew that the further we got away from the last time he was seen alive, the lower chances that would be.
Well, his family is now working with civil rights attorney Ben Crump to investigate his death. According to the Jackson County Sheriff, people in on the boat say Wells chose to stay on the island and assumed he would get a ride with someone else. A judge in Jackson County is breaking her silence about this case after confirming that her son Warren was with Wells the day he disappeared. After rumors started to swirl on social media, she made a lengthy post on Facebook saying, quote, "No one in our family is trying in any way to impede with the investigation by law enforcement or to otherwise hamper the family and law enforcement's quest for answers." Warren was interviewed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and cooperated fully.
Here is what Warren Hudson says happened. The boat Nolan and several friends had come out on started taking on water. The bilge pump was failing. The situation was becoming an emergency and the group needed to move. Hudson, speaking on a podcast after Nolan's death, said the group did not simply leave Nolan behind without a word. He said they asked him to come. He said Nolan declined. According to Hudson, Nolan had been talking with a 19-year-old named Katie McCormick and chose to stay on the island with her. Hudson's exact framing was direct. It was not like they left Nolan. Nolan made the choice to stay. That is one version of events. Here is the second version. Katie McCormick's sister, Gracie McCormick, spoke to the Daily Mail after Nolan's death. Gracie said that based on what Katie told her, Katie had a conversation with Nolan near the time the boat was preparing to leave. At the end of that conversation, Katie assumed Nolan was getting ready to board the boat he came out on. She did not watch him walk away from the shore. She did not see him refuse to board. She assumed his friends would take him with them because, in her understanding, that was simply what you did. You did not leave someone behind. Those two accounts cannot both be accurate at the same time. Attorney Ben Crump, who was retained by the Wells family, put it plainly when reporters pressed him on this specific point. He said one side was claiming Nolan got on the boat and the other side was claiming he did not. That is not a minor inconsistency in a timeline. That is a direct, factual contradiction about where Nolan Wells was in the final moments before that boat pulled away from Horn Island. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer, who reviewed the publicly available details of the case, offered a measured counterpoint worth considering. She suggested the contradiction might be a timing issue rather than a deliberate inconsistency. Her read was that Katie may have walked away from Nolan before the actual moment the boat departed, meaning she genuinely believed he was following behind her toward the boat without witnessing whether he actually boarded. That explanation is plausible. It does not, however, resolve why Nolan was not on that boat when it left. Then came the video. In the days after Nolan's death, footage began circulating on social media that appeared to have been recorded on or near Horn Island on July 4th. In the audio of that video, a voice could be heard in what sounded like a heated argument, with someone demanding their phone back. Ben Crump, at a press conference, said that multiple people who knew Nolan had identified the voice in that video as his. The implication was significant, that Nolan had been involved in some kind of confrontation on the island that day. On July 13th, Trace's Tin Shepard came forward publicly. He gave an interview to ABC News and stated clearly that the voice in that video was not Nolan's. It was his. Shepard said the argument captured in the footage was between him and a stranger, someone he did not know, who initiated the confrontation. He said that after the altercation he left the island with his uncle. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has not confirmed whether any physical altercation on Horn Island on July 4th involved Nolan Wells. What they have confirmed is that they are actively investigating reports of alleged altercations on the island that day. In their public request for evidence, investigators specifically asked for original, unedited photos and videos from July 4th depicting alleged altercations or any footage believed to contain images of Nolan. That language, alleged altercations, does not appear in official communications by accident. At a press conference on July 10th, Christine Wells Wansley and Elmore Wansley stood before reporters and said what parents say when the answers they have been given do not add up. They said they could not fathom why their son would voluntarily separate from his group. Christine added that she suspected footage from that day was missing from Nolan's phone and his Snapchat, because Nolan was someone who documented everything, and the record from that day had gaps. Two competing stories. One missing young man. And a recorded phone call from that afternoon that was about to complicate everything. If you are not subscribed to Unsolved Files yet, right now is the time. What comes next is the only time-stamped recorded evidence from that afternoon, and it raises questions that have not been answered by anyone on record to this day. At approximately 4 p.m. on July 4, 2026, someone on that boat picked up a phone and made a call. Not to 911. Not to the United States Coast Guard. The call went to CTOW, a private marine towing company. That choice, made in the middle of what the caller himself described as a sinking emergency, is one of the details that investigators and the public have not been able to move past. The caller was Wyatt Piran, one of the teenagers on board. The boat was a 22-foot 2022 Triton offshore vessel. It was taking on water near the west tip of Horn Island. The bilge pump had stopped working. Water was coming up inside the hull and the teenagers on board were running out of time to do something about it. CTOW dispatcher Vicky answered the call. From the first seconds, it is clear Piran is not in a stable state. He is breathing hard. His signal is cutting in and out. He tells Vicky the bilge pump has stopped and the boat is going down. Vicky stays calm and professional throughout, asking the standard intake questions. Membership number, phone number on the account, GPS coordinates. Piran cannot answer most of them. He does not know the membership number. He does not know the account phone number. He thinks the membership might be under the name Jerry, identified as Jerry Adgerson, though the name is also heard in the call as Jerry Ackerson. Jerry is the grandfather of one of the teenagers on board and the registered owner of the boat. He held the CTOW membership. While Vicky works to locate the account, she transfers Piran to Captain Seth, the local CTOW captain responsible for dispatching assistance in that area. What neither Piran nor Vicky knew at that moment was that Captain Seth had already spoken separately to Jerry by phone. Jerry had indicated to Seth that the situation on the boat might be resolving on its own and that he would call back if they still needed help. So when Vicky transfers the call, Captain Seth is operating with two conflicting pieces of information. A teenager saying the boat is sinking and a grandfather saying it might be fine. Back on the call with Vicky, the questions continue. She asks how many people are on board. This is where the exchange becomes difficult to follow. Piran first says there are no children. Then when asked specifically about adults, he says nobody on board is over the age of 21. Vicky has to rephrase the question entirely, asking whether there is a living person, someone breathing, on the boat. Piran eventually confirms there are around 7 people on board. Then comes the question that sits at the center of everything. Vicky asks whether everyone on board is in good health. Piran says yes. He does not hesitate. He does not qualify it. Everyone is fine. A moment later, Vicky asks if they need the United States Coast Guard. Piran says no. Directly and without pause. He does not want the Coast Guard. Underneath all of this, the call is not quiet. There is significant background noise throughout. Multiple voices, overlapping conversation, the sound of people dealing with something urgent. At one point, audible on the recording, Piran directs someone on the boat named Bart to get in and pull the drain plug, a reference to a manual drainage point on the hull. He is giving orders while simultaneously trying to communicate with the dispatcher. The chaos on that boat is not in question. Warren Hudson later offered an explanation for one specific element of the background audio that would become heavily scrutinized. He said that during this period, someone on the boat was screaming at Nolan to board before they left. Hudson's account was that a member of the group was yelling at Nolan to get on the boat. That, according to the friends, is the reason Nolan's name could be heard in the background of the call. Someone was trying to get him to come with them, not reporting something that had already happened to him. After the call's public release, the scrutiny extended beyond just the audio. People online identified individuals they believed were connected to the recording and began targeting them directly. One family, the parents of a 21-year-old who had been identified in connection with the call, issued a public statement to correct what they described as fabrications spreading online. They clarified that their son had not been a passive bystander. He had boarded the malfunctioning boat to assist and had briefly towed it a short distance using his own vessel. They were responding to harassment, not to any criminal allegation. The call ends with the CTOW dispatch process underway and the boat still in distress. But the question it leaves behind is not about the mechanics of the bilge pump or the GPS coordinates or even the membership number. 7 teenagers. A 22-foot boat actively taking on water. 10 miles of open gulf between them and the mainland. An uninhabited federal wilderness island with no staff, no signal, and no emergency infrastructure. And when asked directly whether they needed the United States Coast Guard, the answer was no. That answer has never been explained publicly by anyone who was on that boat. Shortly after the CTOW call became public, a second version of that recording began circulating. This one came from TMZ. The outlet published what it described as an enhanced version of the same call and reported that within the background noise, underneath the panic, the broken signal, and the overlapping voices, there were phrases that had not been widely noticed in the original. According to TMZ, the enhanced audio appeared to contain the phrase, "Is he dead?" a reference to Nolan by name, and what sounded like instructions directed at someone to check on a person who was unresponsive. If accurate, those phrases would not be incidental background noise from a boat emergency. They would be evidence of something far more serious happening on that vessel at the exact moment the caller was telling the dispatcher that everyone on board was in good health. That is a significant claim. And it deserves to be treated with the same precision that any significant claim in a criminal investigation demands. The first thing to establish is what separates the TMZ version from the original. The recording officially released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources has a confirmed chain of custody. It came directly from a government agency involved in the investigation. The TMZ enhanced version, according to digital forensics expert Robert Fried, was approximately 20 seconds longer than that original. When Fried's team compared the two recordings side by side, they found something that went beyond a difference in length. The two files had different digital fingerprints. The underlying content between the versions was not identical. Fried's team then produced independent transcriptions of both recordings. When they worked through the TMZ version looking specifically for the phrases the outlet had reported, they could not corroborate them. The words that TMZ said were there did not emerge from Fried's independent analysis of the same file. That does not automatically mean the phrases are absent. Audio forensics at this level of background noise involves a significant margin of interpretation. But it does mean that as of the time this documentary was produced, no independent forensic examination has confirmed what TMZ reported. Fried also introduced a concept that is essential to understanding why this kind of audio evidence is so difficult to evaluate fairly. It is called auditory pareidolia. It is a documented cognitive phenomenon, the brain's tendency to perceive recognizable words or familiar patterns in ambiguous sound after being told what to listen for. Fried noted that the effect is not a sign of poor judgment or wishful thinking. It is simply how human auditory perception works under certain conditions. He acknowledged that after hearing about the specific phrases being attributed to the recording, his own mind began moving toward them when he listened. That is the phenomenon at work, and it affects trained professionals as well as the general public. Other audio and sound engineers who reviewed the TMZ version publicly asked listeners to treat it as a reference point, a version worth examining, rather than treating it as a confirmed transcript. The distinction matters because in a case heading toward a grand jury, the difference between what someone appears to say and what can be forensically verified is not a minor technical footnote. It is the difference between evidence and interpretation. The friends, through sources who spoke to TMZ after the enhanced version was published, responded to the claims without directly addressing the specific phrases. Their position, as relayed through those sources, was that the background audio reflects panic related to the boat sinking and nothing more. They did not specify what words were or were not spoken. That response does not confirm the phrases. It also does not deny them by name. What remains is this. The original CTOW call, the version with a verified chain of custody, released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, is the only confirmed audio document from that afternoon. It contains a caller who said everyone on board was in good health. It contains an explicit refusal of Coast Guard assistance. And it contains background noise that 2 days later, a park ranger found was connected to a day that ended with Nolan Wells dead in the water. Whether the enhanced audio holds anything more is a forensic question that has not been resolved. The sealed state autopsy has not been released. The grand jury has not convened. And every development in this case will be covered on this channel the moment it happens. If you are not subscribed to Unsolved Files, subscribe now and hit the bell. You will not want to be the last to know. Nolan Wells did not come home on the night of July 4th. When it became clear he was not returning, Christine Wells Wansley did what any mother does when her child does not come back. She filed a missing persons report at midnight. That report set off a search operation that would grow to involve multiple agencies across several days. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office led the ground effort. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the National Park Service all joined the search. So did the United Cajun Navy, the Louisiana-based volunteer search and rescue nonprofit whose Vice President Brian Troshers had already told CNN what conditions on Horn Island looked like that day. Troshers specifically flagged one detail that would become relevant to the physical evidence. Strong rip currents were present in the waters around Horn Island on July 4th. For anyone who entered that water under compromised conditions, those currents represented a serious and legitimate risk. The search extended through July 5th without a confirmed location. At approximately 8:45 a.m. on July 6th, a U.S. park ranger found a body in the water off the northwestern tip of Horn Island. The physical description matched Nolan Wells. The body was recovered and the identification process began. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed the identity through dental records. It was Nolan. Lind told CNN that when the body was initially examined, there were no immediate obvious signs of foul play or physical trauma. But he was also clear that the circumstances surrounding Nolan's death were uncertain enough to warrant a full forensic examination. Lind requested a complete autopsy from the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office to determine whether anything had been missed in the initial assessment. Sheriff John Ledbetter told ABC News that at that stage of the investigation, nothing investigators had uncovered led them to conclude a crime had taken place. He was equally clear that the investigation was active, ongoing, and that the department was continuing to work to establish the full facts. One detail emerged that would carry significant weight in the weeks ahead. When Nolan's body was recovered, his phone was not on him. His friends told investigators he had left it on the boat when he stayed behind on the island. A phone. Left on the boat. By a young man who, according to his own mother, documented everything. 2 autopsies were conducted on Nolan Wells. Their findings, taken together, have produced more questions than answers, and one of them remains completely sealed from public view. The first autopsy was performed by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office. It was completed on July 31, 2026. Its results have not been released. They will not be released to the public until a grand jury has reviewed them. That is where those findings currently sit. The second autopsy was independent. It was funded by Colin Kaepernick and performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell, a board-certified forensic pathologist, the former chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C., and the current president of the National Medical Association. Mitchell's findings were announced publicly by attorney Ben Crump on July 22, 2026, at the 117th NAACP National Convention in Chicago, before a standing room-only crowd. The result: cause and manner of death, undetermined pending investigation. That classification is not the same as a finding of accidental drowning. It is not a finding of foul play either. It means the pathologist who examined Nolan's body could not reach a definitive conclusion, and the report explains precisely why. Mitchell found red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. There were no underlying skull fractures. There were no lacerations to the skin in that area. The discoloration was documented, but its cause could not be determined from what Mitchell had access to. He noted that the level of decomposition present in the body, a factor in any case where a person has been in the water for a period of time, can obscure bruising on the skin surface, particularly during a second examination. Dr. Kendall Von Crowns, the chief medical examiner of Tarrant County, Texas, who had no involvement in this case, was asked by reporters to comment on that specific finding. He said the red discoloration in the soft tissue could represent one of two things: decomposition changes in the musculature, or injury consistent with blunt force to the back of the head and neck area. Those two explanations point in entirely different directions. One is a natural post-death process. The other is not. Dr. Priya Banerjee, a board-certified forensic pathologist also not involved in the case, told NBC News that second autopsies carry an inherent and unavoidable limitation. Once a body has been through an initial autopsy, organs removed, tissues dissected, systems examined, the original condition cannot be fully restored for a second examiner. What Mitchell received was not the same body that the state's medical examiner first examined. That is not an accusation. It is a forensic reality that applies to every secondary autopsy conducted after a primary one. The most significant limitation Mitchell encountered was this. When Nolan's body was received for the independent examination, the anterior neck structures, the throat, were not present. They had been retained by the state during the first autopsy. Mitchell noted in his report that retaining anterior neck structures during an initial autopsy is a recognized forensic pathology practice, typically applied when the primary examiner considers the condition of the neck potentially relevant to cause of death. The state kept those tissues. Mitchell could not examine them. Because of that absence, Mitchell could not rule out injury to the neck as a contributor to or cause of Nolan's death. He also could not directly observe the airway for the presence of water, a key indicator in any drowning investigation, and could not examine the stomach contents for the same reason. Mitchell compiled 7 outstanding questions from his examination. Among them, what caused Nolan to enter the water, whether water was present in his airway, and whether there was evidence of bleeding inside the skull. His central conclusion, read by Crump at the press conference, was direct. The condition of Nolan Wells before he entered the water is the crux of the matter. Without knowing what state he was in before he went into that water, a cause of death cannot be determined. On July 23, Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath confirmed in a public statement that the state autopsy report will remain withheld until the grand jury reviews it. She stated that every non-natural, non-accident death in Jackson County is handled this way and that this case is no exception. Dr. Mitchell is not finished. He is actively seeking access to the throat tissue retained by the state and to photographs taken near the time Nolan's body was discovered. Until he has those, his examination remains incomplete. 2 autopsies. 1 sealed. 1 incomplete. And the most critical tissue in the entire forensic picture is still in the custody of the state. When the sealed autopsy results are released, Unsolved Files will break down every finding in full. Subscribe now and hit the bell, because when that report becomes public you will want to be here. While the forensic picture was being contested in press conferences and pathology reports, the investigation on the ground was expanding steadily. By the time this documentary was produced, approximately 60 witnesses had been interviewed by investigators working to reconstruct Nolan's final hours on Horn Island. That number reflects the scale of the gathering on July 4th, roughly 300 people on an island with no exits other than the water, and the volume of potential witnesses who were present that afternoon. Investigators have been methodical. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office confirmed they are actively pursuing reports of alleged altercations on the island that day and working to determine whether any of those confrontations involved Nolan directly. Their public ask for evidence has been specific: original, unedited photos and videos from July 4th, with particular interest in footage depicting altercations or images believed to include Nolan Wells. unedited. That word matters. Investigators are not interested in what was posted online. They want the raw files. Then there is the phone. Nolan's cell phone was not on his body when he was found. His friends told investigators he had left it on the boat. Christine Wells Wansley told reporters that her son documented his life constantly. Photos, videos, Snapchat activity. She said she believes footage from July 4th may be missing from his records. A phone belonging to an 18-year-old at a holiday gathering with 300 people should contain a detailed record of that day. Location data, timestamps, text messages, app activity, none of it has opinions. None of it adjusts its account based on who is asking. On July 15th, Ben Crump announced that both his team and law enforcement had reached an agreement for a mutual inspection of the phone. Both sides will examine the data. Both sides will have access to whatever that device contains. If the phone places Nolan somewhere that contradicts the accounts already given publicly, that information will surface through this process. The case also carries a dimension that has shaped how the public and national figures have responded to it. Nolan Wells was the only black person in the group that traveled to Horn Island on July 4th. He was the only one who did not come home. Sports commentator Stephen A. Smith addressed the case directly on News Nation's Cuomo program, stating that parents who send their children out have a reasonable expectation that they will return. The NAACP adopted a formal resolution calling for a thorough and transparent investigation into Nolan's death. The case drew national attention not only because of the unanswered questions but because of the broader pattern those questions sit inside. That national attention brought consequences of its own. After the CTOW call was released publicly, individuals identified in connection with the audio were targeted online. Doxing campaigns followed. Death threats were made. A man was arrested for making threats against a public official connected to the case. Families of people mentioned in the recording issued public statements pushing back against what they described as outright fabrications being spread across social media platforms. On July 15th, the Wells family met with District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath. Ben Crump described the meeting as respectful. The outcome was a confirmation the family had been waiting for. The case will be presented to a grand jury once the investigation is complete. The grand jury will receive the evidence, the autopsy results, the witness accounts, and whatever the phone inspection produces. No hearing date has been set. No public timeline exists. The investigation remains open. Nolan Wells was buried on a Monday morning at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs. Hundreds of people filled the building. His mother had made one request, that everyone wear sky blue. The color of the Ocean Springs High School football team. The color Nolan had worn on the field. The color his community chose to put on their backs when they came to say goodbye. The response that gathered around this case was not limited to the people who knew him personally. Actor Tyler Perry covered the funeral expenses in full. Colin Kaepernick, who had already funded the independent autopsy performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell, ensured the family had access to their own forensic examination without having to carry that financial weight themselves. These were not symbolic gestures. They were direct interventions that gave the Wells family resources and legal standing they would not otherwise have had at the speed this case required. Reverend Al Sharpton delivered the eulogy. Before he finished, he announced a $50,000 reward for anyone who came forward with information leading to an arrest and conviction in connection with Nolan's death. Tyler Perry matched it. The combined reward stood at $100,000. Filmmaker Spike Lee attended the service. Former NFL player Terrell Owens was also present. The attendance of nationally recognized figures was not incidental. It reflected the scale of public attention this case had drawn and the level of pressure being applied to ensure the investigation moved forward with accountability. Christine Wells Wansley spoke about her son. She described him as someone who made people feel seen, welcomed, and valued. Someone who could lift a person's confidence with a few words and make them feel like they belonged. She said the family would keep fighting for him. Ben Crump addressed the mourners directly. He told them the fight for truth and justice for Nolan Wells would continue until there were real answers. Not theories, not statements carefully worded to avoid specifics, but answers. The church was full. The reward was set. And the investigation was still open. As of August 3, 2026, this is where the case stands. The state autopsy is complete. Its results are sealed and will remain that way until a grand jury reviews them. No charges have been filed in connection with Nolan's death. No arrests have been made. Dr. Roger Mitchell is still working, still seeking access to the throat tissue retained by the state during the first autopsy, and still waiting on photographs taken near the time Nolan's body was discovered. The mutual cell phone inspection between Ben Crump's team and law enforcement is ongoing. Approximately 60 witnesses have been interviewed. The investigation is active. That is the official picture. But the questions underneath it have not been answered by anyone publicly on record. Why did the caller on that CTOW recording explicitly refuse the United States Coast Guard with 7 teenagers on a sinking vessel 10 miles from the mainland? Why was Nolan Wells left on an island with no communication infrastructure, no boat and no phone? An island the National Park Service describes as having no staff, no shelter and no way to call for help. What does the cell phone data actually show about where Nolan was and what was happening in those final hours? What did the Mississippi State Medical Examiner find in the neck tissue that Dr. Mitchell was not able to examine? Was Nolan involved in any altercation on Horn Island on July 4th? And does anyone hold unedited footage that shows it? And when the grand jury finally convenes, who decides what evidence gets placed in front of them and what does that evidence say? None of those questions have been answered. Some of them may never be answered publicly. But the grand jury represents the next definitive moment in this investigation. When it convenes, it will see the sealed autopsy results, the witness testimony, the phone data, and whatever physical and forensic evidence investigators have assembled over the weeks since July 4th. Christine Wells Wansley has not stopped. She has been publicly vocal, legally aggressive, and consistent in one demand, that someone account for how her son went to an island with his friends and did not come home. That demand has not been met. Not yet. This case is not closed. And Unsolved files will be here for every development. When the grand jury convenes, when the autopsy results surface, when the phone data becomes public, and when the next piece of this investigation falls into place. Subscribe to Unsolved Files and hit the bell so you do not miss a single update. Drop a comment below and tell us which unanswered question in this case stands out most to you. We read every one.